The United Nations Secretary General is calling for a diplomatic solution to the North Korean crisis. The U.S. response to Pyongyang's nuclear threat is the subject of this morning of our ongoing series, Issues That Matter. South Korea's Navy conducted live fire drills yesterday to show its military force after North Korea's largest nuclear test Sunday.
The U.S. wants stricter sanctions on Kim Jong-un's regime as his nation possibly prepares for a new missile test. Former Defense Secretary Ash Carter spent more than 3 decades working on national security issues in both Republican and Democratic administrations. He was involved in military planning during the 1994 crisis over North Korea's nuclear program. He's now the director of the Belfer Center at the Harvard Kennedy School and joins us this morning. Ash Carter, this is certainly your territory, so we're very curious to see what you're thinking these days. You've heard Secretary Mattis say this, that the U.S. would respond to any threat by North Korea, in his words, massive military response. Sounds very scary, sounds very intense. What type of threat would warrant that type of response? What does that mean when you hear that?
Well, we've been prepared and continue to prepare for decades for North Korean aggression. We are very well prepared. It's important that we protect our people as well as our friends and allies from North Korea. I think at this juncture, what I would advise is a strategy of coercive diplomacy. You know, people talk about, is it diplomacy or is it military action? In general, in strategic affairs, and certainly in this case, what you need is a mix in which you require North Korea to take steps progressively to reduce the threat, or you take steps progressively to military and economic sanctions to apply pressure to them. If down the road they continue to make the wrong choice, and this road, it does in fact lead to military conflict, we have had the time, first of all, better to prepare our forces even than the considerable preparation that they have now.
But what is
also
the wrong
to ready
choice?
Our allies, Japan and South Korea, and also to sideline Japan. And those are necessary preparations for effective military action. But I think at this juncture, it's coercive diplomacy, the mix of the military and the diplomatic, that's the path to take, not an either or.
But you just said if they make the wrong choice. What is the wrong choice that would warrant massive military action? What do we need to see? Some people say firing these test missiles is a very disconcerting thing.
Well, they're all disconcerting. It's been going on for quite some time. I think that what we need them to do is halt underground testing of nuclear weapons, halt tests of ballistic missiles, not fire ballistic missiles of long range in our direction or the direction of our allies. And at each step of the way, they can either take that step back from this brink or toward the brink. In either case, we will be prepared either to relax pressure on them or to increase pressure on them. And as you say, down the road, if they continue to make bad choices, military action may be necessary. I think Secretary Mattis is pointing to our readiness to do that and the possible necessity to do that. But after coercive diplomacy plays out in this way, we are better prepared if that eventuality occurs, which it well may.
And as you know, the question has been whether China and Russia will engage in that coercive diplomacy into the way that may be needed. President Trump is having a phone call this morning with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Is it time for the Chinese to cut off the oil supply to the north?
Well, absolutely. It's been for some time in what I would regard as China's best strategic interest in the long run to apply its ability to essentially strangle North Korea, importantly through energy, to get them to stop doing something which could lead to a war on China's border. We will win that war, but it is a very, very unpleasant war for us, but also for China. However, as you say, I've been observing this for decades now, and it's hard to be optimistic because the Chinese have consistently disappointed. Right. So I think we also need to prepare ourselves and prepare our friends and allies. And if the Chinese sideline themselves, then that's unfortunate for them, unfortunate for us, but we will be prepared to protect our people and our friends and allies.
Secretary, how did we get here in the first place? I know privately some feel the Obama administration was too restrained on North Korea. Would you agree with that assessment?
Well, this has been going on for decades. It goes back, as you pointed out, multiple administrations of both parties. The North Koreans first tested nuclear weapons in 2006. They were launching ballistic missiles in the 1990s. So it's been getting worse, and it is a very serious threat.
But do you think more should have been done than under the last 2 years of the Bush administration and then the 8 years of the Obama administration? Do you think more could have been done?
Well, I certainly think we had some success, some limited success in the 1990s, this was mentioned earlier, with something which was essentially coercive diplomacy, a step-by-step progressive intensification of pressure or relaxation of pressure, depending upon whether North Korea took steps in the right direction. I still think that's the right way to go. It's a mixture of diplomacy and military. And as I said, if the North Koreans continue to make bad choices, it will lead, in all likelihood, to greater military action. But we will be better prepared. We will have positioned more forces on the Korean Peninsula. That may be necessary. That's been discussed. Sanctions, you've mentioned, important. Also providing advanced systems to our allies, South Korea and Japan, because they will be an inevitable part of any military action. Because remember, the North Koreans hate them as much as they hate us, and they threaten them, and they're right there, and they're our friends and allies. And so there are ways in which, through this process, we can both give a try to the possibility of diplomacy succeeding, but also position ourselves progressively in a strengthened posture if and when military action is required, which it may well be.
Ash Carter, thank you very much, joining us from Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center. We appreciate your time.